It costs the Department of Defense $20 billion every year. Corrosion has detrimental effects on equipment and decreases the military's readiness, performance, and safety. Corrosion is a common phenomenon occurring all around us. We've seen its effects. From old toys to rusty old cars, there's no question that corrosion has a great impact on the world we live in.
It doesn't just affect the Army, it affects industry and it affects us all, even our own personal lives with your vehicles. 750-1 is Army material policy, maintenance policy. It's the Bible for maintenance. It talks about corrosion. It actually says in there that every unit will appoint a person to be in charge of the corrosion program. That's how important it is to the Army.
Even after creating detailed technical manuals attempting to mitigate this problem, the solution continues to evade policymakers and government agencies.
As a modeler, you basically model what's known via the science. And corrosion is an area where the science is not really well understood yet.
Back in the early 80s, the Army came out with a corrosion prevention program. They brought the vehicles in, and they basically sprayed a soft rubber coating underneath the vehicles. It was extremely expensive and didn't do very well. It actually locked in a lot of moisture and other corrosives. It caused the vehicle to actually rust faster.
In this presentation, we will be talking about the effect of corrosion in the Army, as well as a few mitigation techniques to greatly increase the working time, combat effectiveness, and efficiency of government equipment and structures. A simple increase in the awareness of corrosion and mitigation techniques can make a significant impact on its effects, and allow leaders to implement and enforce policies already in place.
There's still a lot to learn, there's still a lot to apply, getting new technologies out there, but applying the existing technologies in a disciplined way is the key to reducing the impact of corrosion on cost, system availability, and safety.
Before we get into mitigation techniques, it's important to understand the natural processes of corrosion. Corrosion is a chemical process by which metals and other materials begin to slowly break apart and become weakened. The Army has identified 9 major types of corrosion.
Uniform is basically the whole surface of a metal or a rubber compound being rusted or corroded.
Crevice corrosion, so you can imagine you have some type of metal and you've fastened a bolt to it. The bolt doesn't get tightened down so far that it's actually in contact with that lower metal surface. Liquid will get inside of that gap. It kind of magnifies the concentrations that are inside that gap. So you can develop very corrosive, acidic environments.
Selective leaching. In the wintertime, salt gets under the paint, starts causing leaching and having the material to actually explode out.
All seasons we deal with all different problems. So in the summer and spring we deal with a lot of mud up in Fort Drum where we do a lot of our training. It gets heavy snow all winter, and in the spring thaw it's nothing but mud. The parts, the mud in cases, builds up moisture and can rust and corrode the parts. Winter is pretty obvious, all the salt on the road, it'll destroy the vehicle in no time if you don't keep it clean.
At the end of the day, we'll bring that equipment in and wash it all off. That helps get the salt off, prevents corrosion from happening from the salt getting on the paint and the metal that's exposed.
Galvanic corrosion, anytime you have 2 dissimilar metals in close enough contact to each other, one metal will act as an anode in the system and corrode much more rapidly than it might corrode, if it's not in contact with any other metal. And unfortunately, in many types of systems nowadays, you might have 500 to 1,000 different type of metals, so you have all of these different types of galvanic couples that are present. It could lead to a variety of different types of corrosive behaviors that you're not accounting for.
Spread it. Different types of metals, starts eating away at it.
Other types of corrosion include intergranular, pitting, stress, and erosion.
Talking about some of the different types of corrosion, I mentioned you'll see out here, you see a lot of the paint's peeling off. Corrosion prevention starting at the manufacturer. This was not properly prepped, the bare metal, when it was brand new first. And this is a prime example of it not being prepped properly for the paint to adhere. This part here is technically not corrosion. This is just for normal use. We can paint this all day long. As soon as you start taking it out and using it to move either rocks or dirt, that paint's going to come right off. This is a very hard piece to keep constantly painting. For us to paint this whole dozer, we're spending thousands of dollars just in paint alone. not including the man hours it's costing either. But other areas that are like this can be spot treated because that should be treated right there alone so it doesn't rust.
Visual inspection is key for early detection of all kinds of corrosion. Warning signs include rust, oxidation, and acid damage. Visual inspection is the most cost-effective way to identify the problem.
Rust occurs when ferrous metals, such as steel and iron, will accumulate on it if it ain't protected, like frames, fenders, and cross members on all military equipment, trucks, generators, and trailers. Oxidation, very common on aluminum, exposed aluminum, copper, and brass. Examples of that are our Humvees. A lot of them have aluminum panels on them. If they're not protected, they'll start oxidizing. When sulfuric acid is mixed with lead products like battery terminals, it turns into a gas. And if it's a lot, it'll turn into like a small mist. You'll see different colors like gray, white, blue, green. It depends on what kind of metal is involved in the corrosion.
Corrosion is especially a problem for large companies who rely on corrosion-susceptible equipment. In the Army, regardless of the situation, PMCS is key.
So corrosion is an enemy, and PMCS, which is preventive maintenance checks and services, is the weapon against it, right? Us, the operators.
First line of defense against corrosion is a singular soldier or a DA civilian who operates or maintains Army pieces of equipment. After time, takes a little nicks where dirt or rocks and pebbles hits, chips away the paint, exposes the metal, you got your rust developing. What could have been done for this, bringing it in, having enough downtime set aside so it could be properly treated, rust removed, so there's no more damage. Making sure that on the training schedule, whether you're big Army or your National Guard Reserves, incorporating PMCS in that training schedule is always critical. If you're going to go out on the movement, you schedule the PMCS before. You also want to try and schedule it while you're out, when you're doing one of your rest stops, and then when you get to your endpoint. But did you make sure that the drain plugs are cleaned out and the water's draining out? If not, you just allowed something to start corroding.
Another crucial part of preventative maintenance for Army vehicles is taking care of batteries and other small internal parts.
Half our job is preventing the maintenance, the other half is fixing it. A can of spray saves a lot of man hours and a lot of money in parts. Every large truck in the Army's got 4 batteries. One fleet of vehicles in the 719 transportation unit, there's 30 of those. Times $720, it adds up quick. A couple cans of terminal grease and it solves that problem. We did a crane last winter. We had to replace 20 hoses on it, and it was just all fittings were corroded and rotted away. That's all it was. The thousands of dollars that we spent to fix that could have been solved with $12. Small plug, but it'll take down a $100,000 piece of equipment for a $5 plug, just from a little bit of grease. This was a terminal that had a stretch crack in it, and it wasn't greased or inspected in a while, and it arced and melted. There should be this much more of the terminal. It melted the terminal completely. That's just the battery power of itself. With our job on the line, the devil's in the details. You see, it's all small plugs, small fittings can bring down big pieces of equipment. Yeah. You have the hood open already, so you visually inspect your terminals. All that stuff you can get at AutoZone, the battery spray, a little bit of spray on there, there's a kit. You can cleanse the terminal, then you spray it. Corrosion builds up and it depletes the battery. And a battery could last 7-8 years if you take care of it, or you could replace it every 3 years.
So like in this area here, where the wires are connected to the frame, that is your common ground. Helps keep the batteries fully energized and also helps the truck start when it should start. It's basically the positive and negative makes one big circle. So if any of that circle's broken, the truck won't start.
Corrosion on the battery terminals. The voltmeter is not charging. So your vehicle starts, but it's not charging properly. So it's not going to last long. And again, this is just a small part of it, a small bit of how PMCS is important. 1, doing the actual PMCS, and then 2, how can it affect your vehicle to the point where it can't even crank for something as simple as battery terminal being corroded.
And that's where commanders is critical in allocating the proper amount of time needed for that soldier to actually go out there and start a truck and run it for a half an hour or so. And that helps prevent corrosion within the batteries.
This is a battery terminal cleaner. Again, this is something that you can get with your cars at home. And then this will do the terminal itself. Go right over it. Here we have the two sprays. This is the scrub cleaner that I was talking about. So you just spray it right on the terminal, and it'll eat right through all the grease that's on there already. Put the terminal back on. Bam, unprotected battery terminal. It says right on it too, prevents rust and corrosion. It doesn't get any better than that.
In addition to vehicles and structures, corrosion also greatly impacts military weaponry. Again, PMCS is critical, even when in the field.
Field maintenance is mostly the operator. When the operator go fire, when he goes do his weapons call or vehicle PMCS, at that time he has to notice and look around, see for obvious reasons of finding corrosion. And you will find corrosion no matter where you go. You will always see corrosion. Corrosion builds up anywhere. Wire brushes are used on small areas of corrosion. And you will use these wire brushes to eliminate rust. Once the corrosion is off, now you need to protect it from getting corrosion in the future.
A little bit of corrosion inside the barrel of a tank, how much is that going to throw off the accuracy of that weapon? Will that little bit of corrosion lead to a crack, in that barrel head? Those are the types of things we'd like you to be thinking about and understand that the corrosion could cause catastrophic damage, not only to the equipment, but to lives as well.
That's serious stuff. So you can see how it affects the readiness of our equipment. And as you know, as a soldier, one of the most important things you need is your weapon, right?
Now you have carbon every time you fire your weapon. It creates carbon inside your tubes. If you ever get a new weapon from any type of manufacturer, they're gonna pack it with a whole bunch of grease. And you have to clean that grease up. The weapons start jamming up. And the reason is because once it heats up, it gets even thicker.
Proper cleaning of equipment during and after is critical. If you're out in the field and you got your M16 or your uniform with you, and you're in a constant gunfight, there's always a lull. Enemy pulls away, or we pull away, pull back. That's the time you actually want to start doing a little PMCS on your weapon. Punching a bore out, cleaning some of the carbon off the bolt, things of that nature.
See right here, all this steel, all your steel is corrosive. Like your aluminum, your lower receiver, and your upper receiver, they don't rust. Pins do. The pins right here, your trigger, your pins, your safety select lever, your takedown pins, those are all steel. So they all corrode, they all rust. So if you don't take care of them, obviously they're gonna corrode and turn to rust. Do this every day. Make sure that everything works. When you pull your bolt out, okay, all this is all steel. Okay, all that. Take your bolt apart, lube it up. I like to get a little bit on my fingers. You don't have to necessarily put a goop on your rag and cake it on there. Just a little bit of film. Make sure it all functions good. Most of the stuff inside your trigger mechanism is steel as well. Try and get as much as there on you can. Put it on your fingers, like that. Same with your buffer spring here in the back. That's steel as well. Water gets down in there. You can hear it kind of crunch. You can kind of hear it go. Sometimes, a lot of that because there's dirt and grime in there because you got corrosion. Take that out. Wipe it all off. Put some new lube on it, on your spring there. Get in there real good. Okay, get your toothbrush. Front side, get it all. That's good. All right. See, that's what it should look like. Right there. That's perfect. What happens when we neglect inspection or PMCS? The cost of repairs goes way up when you have to troubleshoot electrical problems. Man hours times labor rate equals dollars, your tax dollars.
Humidity-controlled storage is also a large part of the solution.
Back in the day, the Army did use heavily a lot of wood to store Class 9 items, and they got smarter now and they're actually using metal containers and such. But even that will not always be the right answer, but it's the best that they have right now. A lot of the equipment sits out in the elements year-round. It's used once or twice a month. This time of year, a certain designated piece of equipment is pulled in and left in there. And what that does is, even though it does get cold in there, it does help prevent the batteries from freezing up.
This program is basically emphasized by the National Guard Bureau in 1996, and it's because the National Guard doesn't really use a lot of their equipment on a regular basis like active duty does. So they need to maintain things into cold storage. So in order to do that, they want to make sure that they prevent any kind of rust buildup or corrosion buildup so they can limit the man-hour cost.
Even though humidity-controlled storage is a good method for preventing corrosion, it is very expensive. Again, the most cost-effective solution is visual inspections by junior leaders. In 2007, the Government Accountability Office, or GAO, focused their corrosion research on, quote, cost, readiness, and safety. In order to support the DoD's corrosion efforts, junior leaders in the Army are the first line of defense against annual billion-dollar corrosion losses.
The Army is going to follow the DoD lead, and the Army is actually changing policy now and strengthening their policy, doing a lot, especially in the world of acquisition.
Because it's impossible to completely prevent corrosion, experts created a chart depicting the sweet spot where spending to prevent corrosion and spending to correct corrosion intersect at the lowest cost point. This ideal solution could be found if it were not for the size of the problem and the countless variables involved. An easy, cost-effective path to the solution is increased awareness of the magnitude and importance of the problem to all junior leaders in the Army.
It has become very clear to me that the most important thing you can do is let people know that corrosion's out there, that corrosion's going to impact them, and that there are things you can do about it. It's a matter of leadership, it's a matter of paying attention, it's a matter of catching it early, reducing the impact. It's going to be a big impact on system availability, it's going to be a big impact on their maintenance costs, and most critically, it's going to be an impact on safety.
Following the Army's policy of mission command, leaders can use the technical manuals to counteract corrosion within their own units.
Walk around vehicle and check for obvious damage.
For example, combating corrosion in Hawaii for an aviation unit will be vastly different from counteracting corrosion on a Humvee in Georgia. The statistics on military spending associated with corrosion are staggering, and at first glance, overwhelming. But as we've discussed, individuals taking small steps to both identify and mitigate the problem will go a long way towards the solution.
Billions of dollars are being spent on mitigating measures for corrosion. So if we can come up with better ways to detect it, come up with better ways for doing maintenance schedules to be able to mitigate the corrosion so you don't have to worry about it, those are all things that are important that will not only save the taxpayers money, but make things safer for our military personnel as well.
Corrosion is impacting the Army. It's impacting the Army every day. It's degrading readiness. It's costing money that can be better spent elsewhere. We need to reduce that cost. We think we can reduce it by applying what we already know by about 30% a year. And that starts to get to be big numbers. And that money needs to be invested elsewhere.
It is the responsibility of every junior leader in the military to not only know the basics of corrosion, but to initiate inspections and maintenance. Now that you know what to look for, be sure to clean your vehicle batteries, hoses, weapons, and any other surfaces where corrosion might take hold. If you see something, be sure to let your motor sergeant know. Remember, the first line of defense against corrosion is you. Together, we can make a difference.